Today we're going to read Honey, the Dog Who Saved Abraham Lincoln. It's written by Shari Swanson and illustrated by Chuck Gronick. Young Abraham Lincoln was kneeling deep in the woods when 3 shrill blasts of a whistle cut through the quiet. His corn was ready at the mill and he was late. Watching a frog limp away into the bush, Abe smiled. It wasn't every day that he was able to rescue a frog right out of a snake's mouth. Abe hurried back to where John Hodgen, the miller, was waiting. "Now, Abe, what took you so long this time?" Mr. John asked. "I can't move along fast like some of the boys, Mr. John, because I see so many little foolish things that make me want to stop. I just can't help it to save my life." Well, Mr. John patted the boy's head and handed him a sack of ground corn. "Now get on your way, Abe. You would best get home before dark." Abe heaved the bag onto his shoulder and set off on the long path that wound its way like a rusty snake through the Cobb Creek hills to Lincoln's log cabin. So his parents had sent him out to pick up the corn from the mill. Abe had only a mile or so left to go when something caught his attention and he froze. What was that was rustling in the bushes? Beneath some brambles at the base of a cliff, Abe found a dog whimpering softly, and the dog's front leg was broken. "Oh, did you fall, boy?" Abe asked, and the dog looked into Abe's eyes and wagged his tail. Abe patted the gentle dog's head and looked around for something to use to set its leg. He was only 7 years old, but Abe had spent his whole life on a Kentucky farm and he knew how to take care of animals. He pared 2 sticks, smooth with his pocket knife to make a splint, and then he peeled the soft bark off a pawpaw bush to wrap around the sticks. Finally, he tied it all around the dog's leg with some rawhide from his belt. By the time Abe was through, the sun was slanting low through the trees, and Abe had hefted the bag of corn onto his shoulder and called to the dog. The dog struggled up and limped along after Abe on his 3 good legs. Abe was going to be late, and that wasn't unusual, but this time he would have to explain the dog. So now not only is he coming home late, he's coming home with a dog that doesn't belong to them. Abe's father was asleep by the fire when Abe got home, but his mother was waiting up. "Oh, Abraham, where have you been off to this time? I didn't know where you were. I've been worried." "Well, I found a real honey of a dog. His leg is broken, though," Abe whispered. "Oh, please let me keep him." And Abe looked up at his mother. "He'll do lots of good things for me," he told her. "Just watch and see." So there you can see the dad sleeping, and then Abe's over here talking to his mom. Nancy could never say no to her beloved boy, so the dog stayed, and Abe snuck Honey scraps of food, and soon the dog was able to walk. Honey's leg looked like a curve in a road, but it didn't stop him from trotting along after Abe on their adventures. Everywhere Abraham went, Honey went. So can you guys kind of see the bend in his leg? One day, Abe showed up late to drop off his grain at the mill, and Mr. John just shook his head. "Why do you fool your time away?" he asked Abe. "You have seen these hills and hollows hundreds of times. I can't understand what you find to keep you so long on the road." "Well, Mr. John," Abe answered, "Honey got a possum in a hollow stump and I couldn't just leave him to it. I couldn't just leave Honey. And Abe wandered off a bit to wait his turn. He took out a soapstone pencil to practice writing his letters on a bit of bark. But soon the woods were calling, and Abe got an itch to answer it. Long before he and Honey found themselves at the mouth of a cave, deep, twisting caverns traveled from hundreds of miles under Kentucky. A boy and his dog could get lost in caverns like these, and sure enough, disaster struck. Abe got jammed between two boulders and couldn't move. Try as he might, pulling himself this way and that way and back again, he was hopelessly stuck. And as night was beginning to fall, Honey whimpered and pawed at the ground, and Abe couldn't move. Honey normally never left Abe, but this time he headed alone back into the darkening woods, and Honey would need to get help. Back at the mill, the entire town had gathered into the night to search for Abe, and Mr. John had been blowing and blowing his whistle, but Abe hadn't come. Nancy Lincoln asked Mr. John, "Have you seen the dog, Mr. Hodgen? Was Honey with Abraham when he came to the mill?" "Yes, the dog was with him," answered Mr. John, and Abe's mother was grateful for Honey. It comforted her to know that Abe had his protection. She waited anxiously at the edge of the dark forest, hoping her boy would come home. Then she heard something rustling in the bushes. Here's Honey, she called. And suddenly Honey emerged from the bushes, barking and whining at Nancy's feet. The dog looked up into the faces of one after another until he got to Mr. John. Then Honey jumped up on Mr. John and barked in his face. "Grab your torches," called Mr. John. "We'll follow wherever the dog leads." Yelping and panting, Honey headed back through the woods, and the townsfolk followed behind him. Their torches were parting the night. When they got to the cave entrance, Honey stopped, and the townsfolk were afraid. Many a silent prayer went up for the boy's safety. Mr. John blew 3 times on his cane pole to whistle. So you can see, can you guys find Abe where he's hiding? All the way down here. And you can see where the people have come to the rescue. "Here I am," called Abe, and his voice echoing from deep within the cavern. "But I am stuck." Mr. John carefully made his way into the damp, narrow tunnel, and he found Abraham tightly wedged, but no room was there to swing a sledge and break the rocks. Mr. John could only tug Abe out, and even though it meant leaving some of the boys hide behind. So here you can see they're working so hard to see if they could pull Abe out from between the rocks. Once Abe was back up into the night air, Nancy rushed to hold her beloved son and his precious dog, and Abraham was surprised at the crowd. He smiled at his mother. "I knew that Honey would do great things for me," he said, "and now he has paid me back for mending his broken leg." So there you can see they were all reunited, and the mom and Abe are all happy again. And the next day, and for many more days after that, Abe and Honey were back at their adventures, bumping and scrambling their way along the banks of Knob Creek, a boy and his loyal dog, Honey. So there's the two. And we can still see Honey's got a little bit of a crook in his leg. So that's the end. I hope you enjoyed it.